What if the father of your worldview was a sick man? What a thought. What if some of your most fundamental ideas are not your own? What if they have been refined, distilled, and passed down to you throughout the centuries, and most people are not even aware of it? What if we are the offspring of corrupted thoughts that were formulated thousands of years ago, and our deepest unhappinesses are not our own? In around 400 BCE, the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates was found guilty of impiety and corrupting the youth. His student Plato many years later wrote Phaedo, also known as On the Immortality of the Soul, which shows us Socrates awaiting his execution in the Athenian prison and his final conversation with his visiting friends before eagerly drinking the cup of hemlock that was to dispatch him. The first thing to notice about this final conversation is that Socrates proposes philosophy as he sees it, and what he sees should make every upright seeker of wisdom shudder. In his jail cell, when asked why he was ready to die so willingly, he says, "The aim of those who practice philosophy in the proper manner is to practice for death and dying. Now it would be strange indeed if they were eager for this death all their lives and then resent it when what they had wanted and practiced for a long time comes upon them." Wisdom as preparation for death? One would think that wisdom was about living and life, and even more revealing, eager for death. There are many of this type that we have known throughout history. Turning these pages, we see Socrates say that philosophers should not be concerned with food, sex, the body, clothes, ornaments, and that these things should not be valued and should be despised. Notice the language, and notice that this turning away is in fact a rejection of everything that supports life. So, pleading with his followers to turn away from the world, he declares, "The philosopher more than any other man frees the self from association with the body as much as possible." See how Socrates focuses all of his energies on attacking the body, the senses, the emotions, the passions, and the deepest instincts of humankind. And so he says, "Indeed, the soul reasons best when none of these senses troubles it, neither hearing nor sight, nor pain nor pleasure, but when it is most by itself, taking leave of the body, and as far as possible having no contact or association with it in search for reality." Now, need I point out how opposed this thought leader's way of approaching the world is to life itself? The idea that observation and experience should be ignored has a lot to tell us about this figure of Socrates, not least that despite his zeal, he had to have at first observed the world to be able to even stumble upon this deeply flawed reasoning, and accordingly is undoing his own position. Now the world, of course, is weaved in the fabric of time, and as such it necessarily changes every moment, and change brings with it inevitable decay as well as growth. But there is no growth without decay, and no decay without growth. But for Socrates, change is itself somehow a refutation against the real. Now, to my listeners, be honest. Have you ever entertained these same thoughts, these same feelings? Have you ever asked yourself, what's the point? We all die in the end anyway. Nothing lasts, then what is the point of it all? Now, where do you think this feeling, this idea, comes from? Do you think it's natural? This idea, as with all ideas, had a beginning. Throughout the long stream of human history, many a culture there has been that never diminished life, but instead glorified it, and they were all aware of its passing. The central question is something less valuable because it doesn't last? Is the sun less beautiful, emblazoned in the midday sky because it's bound to set? Is something less real because it's subject to change? Or more so? Socrates thinks less. Do you now too? Now to his manifest psychology. Reading on, we find Socrates saying, to investigate something through the body is to do it through the senses. It is dragged by the body to the things that are never the same, and the soul itself strays and is confused and dizzy as if it were drunk. See the obvious. For Socrates, life, the senses, sensuality, experience is dizzying. Consciousness is confusing to him. He says, but when the soul investigates by itself, as if that were even a remote possibility, it passes into the realm of what is pure, ever-existing, immortal, and unchanging, and its experience then is what is called wisdom. This man was a sick man, because if investigating away from the senses is to be in contact with the pure, then what are the senses, the body, and the very world and life itself? For him, they are impure, undoubtedly. They are dirty, they are sullied, they are diseased. Socrates puts all his powers into disparaging the world. Socrates hates the body, despises life. Socrates makes Maya out of mankind. And of course, since the world changes, he dashes about trying to find the unchanging. It must be somewhere, he cries. And so he says, the invisible always remains the same, whereas the visible never does. This wise old man wants a world that never changes. He wants to mummify the human being, to fossilize nature. But the changeable influence of space and time can only be obliterated in death, obviously. So what is it that Socrates really wants? This wise old gadfly's strategic philosophical move is to project so-called wisdom beyond the world and to invert philosophy so that it is concerned with investigating oblivion and not the grand carnival of life. This most venerated man, this father of yours, who claims wisdom, is in reality a mortician, and all is revealed in his thinking, all revealed in his feeling. No longer holding back, he tells his friends, death, which is separation of the soul from the body, is freedom. Socrates wants to be undone. If philosophy is love of wisdom, then for Socrates, wisdom is about preparing for death, which means that philosophy is no less than the love of death itself. Taking the poisonous cup of hemlock in hand and surrounded by his loyal companions, Socrates gulps down fanatically. And his last words are possibly the most revealing words that Socrates ever spoke. In ancient Greece, the sick would sacrifice a cockerel to the god of medicine, Asclepius, in hopes of a cure. After drinking the hemlock and feeling it course through his veins, Socrates turns to his companion Crito and expresses that life was one long illness, saying, Crito, I owe a cockerel to Asclepius. See that it is paid. Socrates' teachings continue to sway the very substructure of the world and the mind that we inhabit to this very day.
The written world.